In this video, we're going to do a review of functions, so some more examples, and I want to stress the sequence of events. So we'll get into an example first and then go back to the sequence of events. So I'm going to start with an example of area. Alright, so we'll start with an example. Go into the directory. Okay. First, I have a new directory to put some examples in. Okay, so what I want this to do is something like compute the area of a rectangle, say. Alright, so they should run it something like this. So first of all, we'll have to get the arguments. So if they give us less than 4 items, then there's not enough, as usual. Okay, so then down here I want to get my length and my width. So let's say that's my first argument, and it's going to be a number. And then the width is going to be the same except the next item. Okay, so there's 2 ways to go when I'm making a program where I'm going to use a function. Either I design the function first, or I use it. So what I would like to do is something like answer equals area rectangle width, length and width. Okay, and then I'll just print the answer. Okay, so this is how I want to use the function. Now I need to define the function so that it will work. And if this is how I'm using the function, then I know that this function that I define, it has to return a number, and it has to take 2 parameters. Okay, so now I can define my function, because when I define it, it has to agree with how I use it. I have function area rectangle, and what do I know is going to come next? Because I have 2 things here, there have to be 2 things here. I can use the same name as these variables or different. So I'll use something different, say L and W. And then inside of here I should compute something. And I could in general do all kinds of stuff in here. This is a pretty simple one. But these are this. So there could be something more complicated in here, but this is just a simple example. Alright, so let's just make sure this works. Okay, that's correct. Now I want to come back to the order that things happen in. So the program will read this file from the top and starts doing things. When it comes to the function definition, it saves the function definition for later. It doesn't actually run it. And then we get the parameters, and then we're right here. And the order of operations here is, this is an assignment statement, so the right hand side happens first. So this function call is going to happen. And the first thing that happens is the arguments are evaluated. Here they're just the values of these variables, but it could be something more complicated. It could be some arithmetic operation, or it could be another function call itself. But so first we evaluate these, and whatever those values are, they get copied in. So this length gets copied into the first variable here. They always get matched up like this. And this width gets copied in to this variable here. Okay, so first these get evaluated, they get copied in, then the function will run, so those lines will run. If we get to a return statement, that is the end of the function, and this value gets sent back. The return statement could happen earlier than the end of the curly brace. If the return function happens earlier, if I have something here, note this print will never happen. So that will never happen because there's a return before it. The return means the end of the function. And we could verify that that indeed does not happen. We don't see that printed. So whenever that return happens, this value A, whatever that is, that will be the value of this in the assignment. So we ran the function, stuff ran here, it could have printed lines, but whatever the value is that's returned, that is the value that's sitting here to get saved into answer. Now let's go back over to my notes. So the steps here, there's 4 steps. We evaluate the arguments to the function. That was this part right here. We're evaluating those. That's inside the parenthesis, so that's it. In terms of your order of operations, you always look inside parenthesis first. So we evaluate those. Those are copied in. So then we match up the first one here, goes into the first one here. The second one goes into the second one. So those are all copied in. We're about to start at the top of the curly brace inside this function. Okay, once we get those variables created and have the right values, we run the function until the first return statement or the end of the function. Here we have a return statement, so that will get run until we get to there. And the last step is to copy that value back out. Send that value back out as the value of the function. That's the number 4 there. So you want to remember these 4 parts. Evaluate the arguments, copy them into the parameter variables, run the function, and then when it's done, if there is a return value, that gets copied back out. Okay, let's look at another example. So these are all examples that take multiple parameters, which is not something we've done. Let's do this one. Okay, so what I'm imagining here, this would run as find min, max, average, and I'm going to give it, say, 3 numbers, and then it would print min is 3, max is 5, average is 4. Okay, so if I wanted to have 3 things coming in, then I'll have my usual checking the arguments business. So if I want 3 arguments, then I should have at least 5 things there. I'm just going to exit. Alright, normally we would put a error statement there, or a usage message. So I'll call these X, Y, and Z. Okay, Y and Z, and I want it to I want to have my function so that I can do this. Average, min, max, X, Y, and Z, and what I want function should print the min, max, and average. So here I have it so that it's not going to return a value, it's just going to do something for me. Alright, if I'm going to run my function like this, then I know I need something called average, min, max, and then in the parentheses here there's 3 arguments, so I need to have 3 variables here. I'll call them A, B, C, and if you're doing this, you would already want to test this out. Okay, so at least I'm inside of there. Now I want to do my min, max, and average. The easiest to do is the average. This is A plus B plus C over 3. So I'll do that. So AVG. Okay. So I have a variable here that gets the average, and then I print it. All right. Let's do the min and the max. So the min will be the smallest. So if A is less than B, let's say less or equal to B, and A is less or equal to C, then we know the min is A. If B is less or equal to A, and B is less or equal to C, then we know the min is B. B is less or equal to, let's see, C is less or equal to A, and C is less or equal to B, then the min is C. So let's put the minimum in there. So we know that it's going to be A, B, or C. One of those has to be the minimum. And if it's minimum, then it's smaller than the other two. That's all I put in here on these conditions. Let's make sure. And if we switch around, we should get the same answers if the code is correct. And then we would have something like this also for the max, except we'd be doing greater than. And instead of the min variable, we would have the max variable. Okay, so here we have a function. It takes multiple arguments. Remember the order of operations, you go through a file, you start running the code. If you get to a function definition, JavaScript will make sure that it's valid syntax. If you have syntax errors, it will give you an error. But if there's valid syntax, then it just saves it for later. When we get to the name of the function with parenthesis, that means we're calling it. So we first evaluate these arguments, and let's see, maybe I'll change this a little bit. So we don't even really need those variables. We could do it like this, just to see a different way. Okay, so the order of operations now, we save the function for later use. We get to here, we're going to call the function. What happens first is we evaluate the arguments. So this will happen. What does that do? It goes into the argv array, gets that particular element, runs the parse float function, that returns some number, and that is the value that gets copied into A. Alright, so that's the A value, and then the same thing will happen for each of these arguments. This is something that needs to be evaluated, so first it gets evaluated and that gets copied into B. So this is the first step. Arguments to the function are evaluated, and that may involve something, right? So here we're calling the parse float function to get those values. Alright, so those values each get evaluated, copied into these variables, and then the code runs to the end. If there's a return statement, that would be the end of the function. There's not one here, so that's all that happens. Something to note that we haven't talked about these variables A, B, and C are only alive inside of the function. And these values average, min, and max. So I'll put that as a note. Note, function or variables declared inside of a function are local. Only can use inside of the function. So if I try to do down here console.log avg, or let's see what happens there. So what I'm saying is this won't work. It won't give the average variable because this is a variable inside of the function, and anything inside the function that's declared in there stays inside the function. Let's see. So there's my error. So any of these variables, it should be the case for A as well. There's an error. Any of the variables that are declared inside the function, and that includes the parameters, are only alive inside the function. And the reason for that is we don't want to junk up JavaScript with all these variables from inside of functions. What we would like to be the case is this does its work, and then when it's done, all that we have is the result and whatever it did. We don't have all of its variables. That would be less elegant and more difficult to keep track of. So we should put that up in our notes about functions. Functions, so note, variables declared inside of a function are local to the function and are deleted when the function is done. Okay, local is a keyword, local variable. Variables declared outside of functions are global. Okay, so let's see, this process.argv, that's a global variable. JavaScript sets it up for us. In our previous example, that was, what was our other example? Area. Okay, so an area length, width, answer, those are global variables. They're declared outside of a function. The whole program can use them. Okay, I think that's probably enough for this. Let's see what the other examples were. I'll put this in parentheses. We'll leave those. Those could be other things, but we'll leave that. That'll be it for this one.